areas where we couldn't rely on watching TV or a video game, but rather we had to get creative. And we went on a lot of picnics, a lot of adventures, and I learned how to fish, which is something I enjoy doing to this day. And so let's look at how we respond to problems when our kids bring problems to us, all right? If you're familiar with the Love and Logic program, they've coined different terms to describe different parenting styles. One of the styles that they describe is a helicopter parent. And so when you think about a helicopter parent, oftentimes I refer to them as a flight for life parent, because they tend to hover over their kids, rescue them, and are somewhat overprotective. We've had some people even coin the term a lawnmower parent, which is essentially saying where a parent gets out there and mows down the path for their kids to make their path a little bit easier. Now, when we think about a helicopter parent, when our children are little, we are all helicopter parents. If we weren't constantly monitoring them and looking out for their safety, they probably wouldn't survive. And so as our kids get older, we want to start seeing a little bit of a shift into some different parenting, or a different parenting type that I'm going to talk about as we head down through this list. So the helicopter parent, just a few, we talked about how the hover, rescue, and tend to overprotect, but also another way of looking at a helicopter parent approach would be that this parent stands between the problem and the child. And so if the child, for example, forgets a backpack or materials for school, or maybe they do poorly at school and get a bad grade, the parent will step in and address that issue rather than empowering the child with the problem-solving skills to solve that problem, of course, with some guidance. And so an example of that would be a parent bringing the homework, or the project up to the student at school, even though it's like a huge inconvenience for the parent. But ultimately, what happens is the kid starts to know that, you know what, I've got an awesome mom, an awesome dad. If I become forgetful, I know that they'll take care of it for me, which can create some real problems down the road with something we call responsibility deficit disorder. And so those would be kids who are used to not really having to think about their choices and the consequences of their choices, because historically they've had someone who would step in there for them when they make a mistake and work to solve that problem. Another type of parent would be the drill sergeant parent. A drill sergeant parent is great for wartime, emergencies, let's get this done. Here's what we need to do. A lot of rules, a lot of lists. But the problem with the drill sergeant parent is that when there is a problem, the drill sergeant parent does the thinking for the child instead of allowing the child with guidance to think through that problem and to look at possible solutions. Essentially, what happens in a drill sergeant type home is that the kids within that environment can be very susceptible to peer pressure. And the reason why is because unintentionally, when we step in and we do the thinking for our children and we tell them how to solve a problem or deal with the situation without encouraging their thought process to get involved, they don't develop that muscle within their brain, that problem-solving muscle that's so important. And so think of this, say the child is older now and they are less supervised because they're getting older. You can't be with them all the time. And now they are alone and someone brings out maybe alcohol and says, hey, you know, look what I got. Let's give this a try. Come on, give it a try. And even if the child is thinking on some level, ooh, you know, this is not a good idea. I had that dare talk. My parents have talked about this. What happens in a drill sergeant parent is that the peer voice is going to have more power than the internal voice because the child or the teen hasn't had enough practice in developing that internal voice, thought process, and problem-solving process. And so sometimes I know personally that I alternate between being a helicopter parent and a drill sergeant parent. That's, you know, pretty common. But the one that seems to work best for our kids and help them to develop critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, and prepare them for life in the big world, the real world, would be the consultant parent. And so think about if you run a business and you hire a consultant to come in and work with you on a particular project. Take a minute to think about when you hire that consultant, what expectations, what are you hiring them to do? If you have some ideas, you can go ahead and put them in the chat box. So when a consultant, the role of a consultant is to, and I want you to go ahead and fill in the blank. And of course, you know, I've started some of the thinking here because essentially that person is going to come in and they're going to listen first to gather information about what is the problem or what is the goal that you're reaching for. Then as we listen and gather that information and do some research, the consultant is going to come back and they're going to provide some suggestions and ideas based on your unique situation. What's neat about that is that this process is something that goes back and forth. It's a respectful stepping in and getting someone's perspective through that listening process first, but then talking about, okay, what are some possible solutions that could work given the situation that you're talking about? When you think about problem ownership, think about this. A consultant parent is a parent who basically stands alongside the child and the problem. So instead of standing between the child and the problem, we're essentially there providing guidance and support, but ultimately we want the kid to be doing more thinking about the problem than the adult is. You may have heard the phrase, the best problem for any, the best solution for any problem resides in the skin of the person who owns the problem, all right? So I want you to keep that in mind as we look at tonight's problem being the boredom problem, because this philosophy is something that you could apply to any problem that your kids create through their choices or that they come to you with, all right? So our first step in summarizing this slide is focusing on our role as a parent and how our role and our approach to parenting influences our kids, all right? So let's do a little bit of a poll here. When you think about people around you, you know, maybe it's within your community, your neighborhood, your friend group, what are some of the more common parenting type that you see? You know, do you experience more parents who tend to be helicopter parents, who are stepping in and running interference for their kids. When the kid creates a problem, the parent might lecture the kid on being more responsible, but then actually steps in. Is it a drill sergeant parent that just tells the kid, here's what you need to do it now and report back to me? Or are you seeing, more of the consultant parent where there's shared decision-making, shared controlled, guidance, accountability, those types of things. And so I'm going to give this a minute to load in case, I don't know if people are responding to that poll or not, but think about that in terms of people around you, but also, think about yourself, in terms of, how you tend to parent, okay? And we're going to talk about why we might be doing some of those things or parenting from that perspective. So
we have our poll results. They're taking a little longer to come in for some reason.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know. Are you able to see them?
No, and I've lost my grid, so I cannot see people. So it's really hard to. Oh, there you all are. Hello.
So I can just share, we had 56% of parents say that they are identifying with helicopter parents or seeing helicopter parents, 22% drill sergeant, and 22% consultant.
Okay, excellent, thank you. And so then, so let's look at the why. Why do we as parents have a tendency to, if the majority we see are the helicopter parents, what forces cause us to step in and hover, rescue, protect, solve problems for our kids rather than guiding them to solve their problems? What are some of the reasons why that happens? And so I have a few things here to get the thought started. I see one already from Shane Young saying, parents who are in a rush. We live in a very go, busy culture where that seems to be the expectation that's put on us, is that if we're not running our kid from one thing to the other, then we're not perhaps doing our job as a parent. And so it could be the busyness, the cultural pressures that we live in. Things that parents have said in the past. Here's another one. Parents see their child's failure as their failure. That's right. That's the reality. We view our children as a reflection on us. And so in part, we might think, well, if this kid makes mistakes, does that make me a not good parent? Am I not doing my job if I allow my child to make mistakes? Other people talk about, let's see, it was my parents' style. They raised me with a style which I've heard also called an assertive style rather than the passive style. Okay, so William, which style are you talking about? Okay, the drill sergeant style. Okay, raised me with that style. So this is, part of it is the learned behavior. And that this is the environment in which I was brought up with. And so when I am disciplining my kids, those are the voices that come out of my mouth. This is something that I'm familiar with. And I've done that where I've, said things to my kids and they'll say to me, you just sounded like Nana. And I'm like, yep, that's my mom, right? I like this, Cheryl, about, not wanting them to get in trouble. You know what? It's painful to watch our kids make mistakes. We don't want our kids to hurt. We don't want them to suffer. It's within our nurturing instincts to protect our kids, all right? But here's a question for you. Do you want to protect your kids from the real world? Or do you want to prepare them to manage the challenges that come in living in the real world? So that's just something not necessarily to respond to, but something to think about. Do we protect them or do we prepare them? Because our style and how we relate to our kids sends specific messages to them about their ability to solve problems and to navigate our world. All right. Oh no, I'm missing. You know what, folks? I loaded the wrong, an older, not my newest version here. So I'm just going to ask for your input here. We talked about why we step in. And so when we step in and we rescue our kids from the consequences of their choices, or we tell them how to solve a problem without empowering them to think, what message does that send to them about their abilities? If you would just take a minute to type what you think in that chat box. If I rescue, if I solve the problem for my child, what message does that give? What messages? Because there's definitely more than one messages. That they aren't capable of doing it. That's right. So it's not something intentional. We love our kids. We want our kids to be self-confident, but we're unintentionally, by rescuing, hovering, protecting, we're basically telling them on an unconscious level, dude, you wouldn't make it in this world without me. The world is a very scary place. You do not have the skills to figure out how to solve problems on your own. Furthermore, I don't trust your opinion. You're too young to have an opinion, right? And we certainly do not want to create that kind of message to our kids, because that creates an internal scripting process whereby how we communicate with them influences how they see themselves and their abilities to solve problems. So we would never, do that intentionally. It's just something that we need to be aware of and mindful of, so that we're not giving that unstated message, you can't do it, you don't have what it takes. We want them to have self-confidence, to know, hey, I can handle this world. I've been practicing it at home on a regular basis, all right? We want them to be able to think about cause and effect relationships. If I make this choice, what's going to happen? What might the outcome be? And those are your critical thinking skills that we want to develop in our kids. When we step in, and I know I'm belaboring this point a lot, we interfere with that natural cause and effect process. And so they get a distorted view on how that works. I'm going to tell one story and then I'm going to move on. This is a story of, it actually wasn't my kid, it was something that I read through a Love and Logic publication. And it was a story of the world's longest umbilical cord. All right, that would be the cord that's connected to the baby when the baby is born, providing it with life, right? And it was a story of a girl named Cindy. And when Cindy was going through life in high school, she was just a very responsible kid. She had great grades, always got things done, because lo and behold, mom was in the background, basically organizing her life for her and reminding her of her responsibilities and basically stepping in when she made a mistake, all right? If you've been in a Love and Logic class before, you might have heard this story, so you know where it's going. And so what happened is, when you send your kids to college, and some of you may already have kids there, they take away the parent, if you will, because now it's time for the kid to adult and make decisions and be responsible. So mom could no longer step in and you know, register for her classes and things along those lines. So mom said to Cindy, hey, have you registered for your second semester classes? And what do you suppose the kid says? Mom, relax. You're worrying too much. You got to start trusting me. I got this. All right. Okay. I just want you to know that, you know, I know there's deadlines and you're going to want to take care of that. Right. And so a week later, mom checks in. Mom and daughter's just like, I got it. You need to quit being a nag. All right. Have any of you ever been called a nag by a kid? And so mom's like, all right, I need to back up. I need to let this kid be independent. A week later, Cindy finally goes to the registrar's office, and it's the last day to register for classes. And she goes and she hands over her schedule, and this is what she wants to do. And what do you suppose happens? Those classes are filled, or the times available for her to take those classes are just crazy. And so what she does is she pulls out her cell phone and she says, you need to talk to my mom. Do you suppose mom was able to do anything about that? Absolutely not. All right. So we want them to again, get that problem solving muscle moving and being practiced, that cause and effect thinking as much as we can as we prepare our kids to leave the nest. All right. So how do we tackle this issue of boredom with our kids? Some of the research that I've done and looking at this that fits with the approach of having your kids do more thinking than you about the problem. These might be suggestions that you've already given as well. So start thinking about adding some to this. But essentially, oh, you're bored? I have something for you to clean. That might get them focusing on creativity, all right? And that's not intended to be a punishment. You know, a lot of times kids are like, all right, you know, I'll do something. And we do want to develop that how can I help attitude within our homes. Another question to ask is, have you been outside yet? Right? We know that getting outdoors, getting in green space is very good for our mental health and our physical health. So what can they do to get outside, to get that vitamin D and to get some exercise? Could they go for a walk? Could they take a book outside to read? Have they been outside yet? Another one to ask, and again, you're going to notice that these are all in question form because it goes back to the idea of we want our kids to be doing more thinking about their problems than we are, all right? And so by asking questions, we trigger that frontal lobe to start considering different options. What have you created today? Who can you reach out to? I know during, you know, the COVID-19, we're talking about being a little bit more lenient with technology use in terms of allowing our kids to use that technology to connect with other people. All right. What book could you read? And then it could be a situation where a kid is just lonely and they need to spend some time doing something with you. Would you like to do something together? Maybe the kid is just feeling lonely. Other ideas, I love this. What have you done in the past when you were bored? What a great question to ask. You know, if you're able at that time, could you, if you're doing something with them, would you like to play a board game? Or maybe we could play a card game, or would you like to go for a walk? You know, our kids are feeling very isolated. And so the importance of just being able to have some connection time, you know, is very important. I like this one. What is something that doesn't cost money or isn't electronic that you can do? All right. Another great suggestion. And so then, you know, we could take some time to order up things that don't have blinking lights and batteries that our kids could use to create things. All right, so providing them with resources that they can use to do arts and crafts or to research things, you know, online and to make things happen. I like this, put a puzzle together. That's something we've been doing a lot of puzzles in our home. And we're all a little salty with our cat right now because she keeps taking puzzle pieces and hiding them. So, you know, doing puzzles together is another great one. So you guys have a lot of great ideas. You know, cooking and baking. You know, there's a lot of opportunities for creativity when we have extra time on our hands. All right. So we think about this list as I move us forward, because now we're going to talk about how do we get those critical thinking or problem solving skills? How do we start getting that muscle activated within our kids? All right. If you were with us last week, I introduced to you this concept of 5 steps to guide your kids to solve problems. So, but if you weren't here, I am going to review this briefly. The first step is always empathy. Our world needs more empathy. When we take the time to listen and to validate a person's feelings by putting ourselves in their shoes, we communicate some wonderful relationship messages about how much I care about you. All right. And oftentimes, just by validating those feelings, it helps a person to start thinking about their solutions. All right. Their solutions, not our solutions. So an example might be with our COVID-19 situation is our empathy might sound like, you know, it's hard when you aren't able to do the things that you really want to do. You know, it's frustrating when you can't go to school and socialize with your friends. I imagine you're disappointed that you made the soccer team and you're not going to be able to participate in that sport. So there's a lot of loss that we need to, you know, acknowledge before we go into, all right, what are you going to do about it? All right. So let's focus first on empathy, which is putting yourself in the shoes of another person and imagining what it would feel like to be that person. Okay. Then this is where we empower. This is where we activate the frontal lobe, the problem-solving lobe of the brain. So what do you think you could do? All right, and that goes back to the solutions. If you look back in your chat box, I listed some on the screen of questions that you could ask, but you all came up with a lot of really good ideas. Now remember, you don't need to provide the kid with a ton of examples. If you just provide them with 2 or 3 to get those energies flowing, then let them have some time to consider what is it that they want to do. All right. And so that's where we look at, here are some ideas. Remember last week I talked about it's a good idea to provide a bad idea first so that it fulfills, number 1, that control need in order to say no to something, but it also starts them thinking about the consequences. All right. We want our kids to be thinking cause and effect. And so we might say, well, some kids would choose just to, you know, sit there and to ruminate or dwell on how bored they are and how many things they're missing out on. How would that work? Well, the kid might say, that's just going to make me feel even more awful. Well, that is true. Some kids might, and that's where you go into your different suggestions. All right. And the bottom line is that we want to say to the kid, you know, you got this. You can solve this boredom problem. You got this. And it's just amazing the things that kids will come up with when they're empowered. All right. So keep this template, because this is an important template that can apply to any situation, not just boredom. So let's move on. And I'm going to provide you with some more suggestions as we wrap up, and then we'll go to any questions you have. So I've been on the NASA website because, you know, they're in isolation for almost a year at a time. And so if anyone knows how to deal with isolation, it's got to be an astronaut. So we're going to the experts, right? One of the things that I noted in the suggestions that they provided is that, number one, we want to see the big picture and set realistic expectations, all right? You know, the big picture right now is that we're having to stay at home and stay away from others in order to save lives. So here's the big picture. It's something beyond you. I know that this sucks for you and you're frustrated and you're lonely, but the world is bigger than you, and we're doing this because we want to save lives. All right, that's why we're doing it. Now, the second thing that they said was to stay busy and keep your mind active. Now, a NASA astronaut has a very regimented day, and so they're constantly busy and doing a lot of things together. But what we could do is to consider having some plans for the day. You know, what are some things that we can do as part of our daily schedule that will, A, get us outside for a little while, B, help us to nurture that creativity piece, 3, connect with others, all right? 4 might be online school, but just thinking about, okay, how can we provide some predictable structure to this day that helps foster the getting outdoors and doing the things that you had listed earlier, all right? Another thing that they said was to keep your body active. So what does that mean, folks? We got to keep our body active. And so that's, you know, getting outside, walking the dog, getting some exercise, you know, doing things like that. Then finally, the last thing that they said was keeping your surroundings clean and comfortable, all right? And so with so many people around, things can get chaotic pretty quickly. And so we've talked about how to get family members to contribute, but that also means what brings you joy in your environment. You know, for me, it's fresh cut flowers. You know, for me, it's candles. You know, there's just different things that I like to see in my environment that make me feel comfortable, cozy, and at home, all right? Now, there's one more that someone, William, brought up here that I'm going to allude to in our next slide, and this is excellent. Could we use this time for self-reflection? Yeah, this is a great opportunity for self-reflection, and especially for older kids, all right? Young kids aren't thinking so much about their goals and their missions and their priorities in life, but this can be a great opportunity for an older child or young adult to think, to consider where their direction is going in life. You know, self-reflection, to stop and think about, you know, what am I passionate about? What would I do for free? That's a really good question to ask yourself when you're trying to identify what your passion is. What are your strengths? You know, what is something that you do very naturally and consistently, 90% right, you know, each time you do it. So it's a strength is something that comes very naturally to you. It's something that's innate in your well-being, innate in your DNA, if you will. And part of our role as parents is introducing our kids to different activities and things to help them determine what their strengths are, all right? Now, just because something is your strength, just because you're good at something and it becomes natural to you, that doesn't mean that you have to do it, all right? You have many strengths, so we want to connect our strengths with our passions. So once we consider these things, and there's a lot of great resources online, strength builders and things that you could look at to go through this process of developing even an individual mission statement. Then we can look at, all right, how am I spending my time and my money? You know, am I really spending my time on the things that are priorities to me that are my passions, that are part of my long-term goals? Or am I getting caught up in things that really don't matter? And if I do, then this is a great opportunity for us as adults to step back and reflect on, how am I spending my time? You know, what is important to me? What might I want to do differently? You know, and maybe part of that is just, you know, setting a new goal, you know, trying something different or something new. All right. So I like that self-reflection piece is critical. And so as we wrap up here, this is my 14-year-old daughter's room. I was actually pleased. We've been working on making your bed each morning, which her Nana says that research has been done on successful people, and one of the things that they're finding is that they make their bed every morning. I don't know if that's true. I don't know where that came from actually, but she made her bed. But the reason why I brought this up is because we have learned to allow our kids to be bored. And, you know, we've invested in, you know, different things for them to explore just being creative. And so as you look at her room here, you're going to see these, when you were a kid, you might have made, I don't even know what they're called, the chain link thingies. She, after the new year, she made chain links for every season. So obviously there were how many days in a year? We're talking 300 and yeah. And so she did that. That was one of her creative projects. And then you can see that she's pretty into just drawing and being artistic and reading books and things like that. And so that's an area where, you know, another just tip in terms of this COVID time is that while we're home more together in each other's space, that we take time to be deliberate about giving our kids their own space too, so that they have a place to go to and create and just have their alone time as well, because we all need that. So anyway, so there's Sammie's room. She might be mad that I shared that, but I don't think she will be. Anyway, does anyone have any questions with regards to empowering your kids with problem-solving skills to deal with that I am bored scenario? And it would be kind of fun if y'all choose to come back next week, if you wanted to share some pictures of things that your kids have created or things that your kids have done out of boredom, you know, how that has helped them to, you know, just explore new things. Okay. I'll wait just a little while longer, you know, if for any questions to come up. It says, my 6-year-old will say, I'm bored, and if I make suggestions, he often will reject all the ideas and have a fit. Okay, so this is a very typical 6-year-old situation. Actually, even 14-year-olds and young adults do this from time to time. And so this is a great opportunity. So step one, we're going to respond with empathy. You know, oh man, you know, you're looking for something to do and you're not sure what to do. And maybe, you know, dad, mom need to work right now. So you're going to need to come up with something to do on your own. All right. So then you're providing some suggestions, and that's a great thing to do. All right. But then it's up to him to decide what he's going to do. And the message is you'll figure something out. All right. And so what I would recommend is starting with empathy. What are you going to do? What can you do about it? Provide 2 or 3 suggestions, and then say the message is, buddy, I bet you're going to figure it out. You know, let me know how it works out for you. You got this. And if he has a temper tantrum, that's okay. All right. It's time to just go ahead and walk away and for you to busy yourself with what it is that you need to do. You know, if the kid just needs to be alone for a while to think about their boredom and how they could problem solve that and what they can do, that's fine. They might need to do that. If the tantrum's interfering with, you know, your ability to think or work, you might need to separate them from you for a little bit. All right. But give some suggestions, let the kid have a fit, give the kid the can-do message. All right. And oftentimes, you know, parents will have structured boredom time where they deliberately will take the entertaining things away from the kids, whether it's the TV, you know, video game, anything with batteries that you plug in is gone, unless it's music in the background. And they provide their kids with things like Legos, blocks, a paintbrush, a canvas, sidewalk chalk. And they basically introduce the kid into basically taking care of themselves, you know, self-creating, self-soothing, self-entertaining for periods of time. And so that's one other thing, is that when you consider suggestions for the kid, just make sure that there's some materials and things available to the kid to try. All right. And the kid might say, well, I did Legos, I don't like Legos. Okay, what would you like to try today? Tomorrow is another day. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, next week, folks, we are going to be talking a little bit about just anxiety, mental health, depression. You know, I know those are kind of heavy issues, but as we look at the confinement and the stress that go along with the COVID-19, stay at home, jobs, things like that, we know that this is also taking a toll on our mental health as well as our kids' mental health. And so next week, I hope that you will join the discussion, and we're going to talk a little bit about, you know, how do we keep ourselves mentally healthy as we continue through this process of many uncertainties. All right. The other piece is then, you know, what do we do if we have a concern, you know, a concern with ourselves or a concern about our family member? We're getting a lot of feedback from folks that are saying, you know, my kid's just not motivated. You know, they don't want to do anything. And we need to be able to, that motivation needs to come from the inside out. All right. And so we'll also touch on motivation, you know, kids who see motivation, is it depression or is it something else? And how, as parents, how can we respond to that? And anything else that you would like to address on that topic. And then we'll have to think about where do we want to go from here in terms of future topics. And so Rachel's going to be sending out a survey to you folks after our discussion tonight. And you also have a link to the recording. And so if you could think about any specific questions that you have with regards to positive mental health, you know, anxiety, depression, motivation, whatnot, you know, things that you would like to have me focus on, questions you would like to answer, if you could please include those, as well as any future oriented topics that you would like to have addressed. One last thing that we're going to be looking at is the time of day that these are being offered. We went with 6:30 because that's typically when we offer our parenting classes. But with the change in people's schedules, it actually might be easier or okay for you to attend earlier in the day. You know, would you rather do this at 10 in the morning, 4 in the afternoon, or do you just want to keep it where we're at? And so we're willing to make those adjustments to meet your needs so that you can stay tuned in. But if there are no additional questions tonight, then that is it. And I thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank
Thanks, everyone.
you.
Have a good night.
Thanks.